Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers beat the Seattle Kraken in overtime by a score of 3-2. Cuylle gets the game-winning goal. And get this, the Rangers are on a 3-game winning streak for the first time in almost a calendar year. The last time they had a 3-game winning streak was from November 14th to November 19th of 2024. Now, this coincided with where things went totally south. And the ironic thing is it was actually a very similar road trip. Actually, the same teams, different order. But the way it went last season, and again, it was a little bit later. It was in middle of November. So again, we're not quite at the point of 365 days, but the Rangers had beat Seattle and Vancouver and then lost to Calgary and Edmonton. Again, here it's a little bit different, but funny how that works. And look, that is beyond pathetic. The fact that the Rangers had not had a 3-game winning streak in that long of a span is crazy because all it took in this case was 2 over. I mean, look, let's be fair. As much as I want to give the Rangers a lot of credit, and they deserve a lot of it, like 2 of the 3 wins of this winning streak were wins in overtime, right? It more speaks to, it's not so much like that a 3-game winning streak is unique, but the fact the Rangers had not done it in this long, to me, it's almost forgotten about. And I feel like even though this is a different team from last year's team, I think that it's a big deal just because that almost hit an entire calendar year. But anyway, to the here and now. Well-played game by the Rangers. It's a lot of the same things that we're talking about, where just really, really well played defensively, not allowing too many high danger chances. Look, like Shesterkin didn't face that much in this game. And, like the 2 goals he allowed, on the one hand, both of them had their own uniqueness shot wise, but, and this isn't like such a criticism on Igor, and we'll just get this out the way because Igor is he's a non-factor in this game story here, but, he has allowed a lot of goals, gloves on high. And I think teams are trying to take advantage of that. It's something that I've noticed lately with him where he got up to such a great start. And again, look, like on the one hand, like the Chandler Stevenson goal looked like a snipe. And then the Brandon Montour shot, that was a very heavy shot. So I'm kind of towing the line between saying, hey, like give credit to the opposition, but also like Igor has kind of had a little bit of difficulties there. And the bigger point here is that the Seattle Kraken, including overtime, only had 13 shots on goal. I mean, that is pretty remarkable. And of course, that says something about Seattle, definitely. And speaking of Seattle, Capo Caco makes his season debut. He had been injured. Makes his season debut, and of course, his first game against the Rangers in his career. And then also, it's Ryan Lindgren's first game against the Rangers. And he had actually a pretty solid game. He was noticeable and, but again, that's kind of a story for another day. We'll make a bigger deal about that from a Rangers side when they come back to MSG. Show a nice little tribute, Kako and Lindgren, that is. And and just kind of on that same front, Will Borgen, who was in that Kako trade, he has his first game back in Seattle. And he'd been there for a decent amount of time. But yeah, like just not a whole lot to speak of in terms of chances for the Kraken. I mean, the fact that their highest shot total for a period was 5, and it came in the first period, like that is crazy. So there's a lot to like that what's coming from the Sullivan system. There's a lot of buy-in for the most part this year, but goal scoring is still an issue. And I still contend that like the top guys are not getting it done. Now, the overtime goal is a goal scored by Will Cuylle, who really at this point is one of your more relied upon players, and he is playing a lot better. That's a good sign. He has really picked up his play, and JT Miller kind of slowly but surely is getting there. He makes a big time play on the assist. It's really, look, Artemi Panarin has been a massive disappointment. And look, like I think there's a lot of factors in play here when it comes to Panarin. But they loaded up on the top line, and the ironic thing again is that you got some good contributions further down the lineup, which you wouldn't. Okay, it doesn't really affect the fourth line, which did get a goal. Also was on for a goal against, but not going to hold that against them. The fourth line played quite a bit, and that's the Carrick line centering Edstrom and Brodzinski. Like they account for the first goal of the game for the Rangers. We'll talk about that, but um, and by the way, same lineup as well. So healthy scratch for Matthew Robertson, who we'll talk about that coming up here too, where I feel as if maybe we could see him next game. He probably won't, but I think it's on the horizon. And then Brennan Othman. Now that's a different story. Brennan Othman, I don't know. Like he might for multiple reasons. I'll just say it right now. Like Vincent Trocheck's probably not too far from coming back. Now the Rangers' next game coming out of here is home against Carolina. And we'll preview that one once we're done with the Seattle game. But there's a world where Trocheck, in theory, could come back. My gut tells me no. But even if it's not that game, it's probably, soon thereafter. So that's going to hurt someone. I mean, certainly in the case of Othman, he'd be a guy that would be sent down. And then like a guy like probably Brodzinski is most in danger of losing the spot. But hey, like he's done a solid job since he's been in there. But going back to the beginning of it all, it's more, you know, the Panarins and the Zibanejad, like that you just wish you had more from it. And it goes back to the power play. Power play is 0 for 3. Like it's my biggest concern. And I think that there's a lot to like for the way they're playing. They're 6-5-2 in a crazy, crazy bunched up Eastern Conference. It's nuts that there is not a single team as we are now in the beginning of November. So there's been 3 weeks of action, give or take, maybe a little more than that, actually. Probably more than that. No team has a below 500 points percentage. So in other words, I think it's actually the Islanders and the Bruins. Like the Bruins are 7-7, Islanders are like 5-5-1, somewhere around there. It's like crazy where top to bottom, it's a deep conference. Like, and maybe it's not so much top heavy, but you don't have that many bad teams. So, just we figured I'd mention that. But let's get into this one though. Because there'll be some talking points along the way here. And look, the Rangers were just consistently the better team throughout. Not to say there weren't spurts of time where the Kraken had some control. That's going to happen, but the Rangers really had the territorial edge and just were just stifling defensively. So first period at 4:12, Josh Mahura trips Alexi Lafreniere, but the Ranger power play does not score, and it's not for lack of ozone time. That's there, but I don't give a shit. I really don't. Like it's about results, and it's just not happening. And I know, especially because the Rangers are winning, you're not going to spotlight this as much, but I really would like for them to change the personnel, mix it up, and maybe go with a more balanced attack. And the funny thing is, and I'll say this now because there's a chance that I may forget it. In the second period, there was actually a disallowed goal that the second unit would have scored. I believe it would have been Will Cooley's goal, but they had said that he had actually, and he did. It was ruled a goal. Then they basically very quickly changed it to no goal on the ice, where Cooley kind of pushes the pad of Joey Decord, the Kraken goalie, but I thought it might have still been worth another shot to look at. Mike Sullivan chose to not do that. And that's been a little bit of a theme where Sullivan is a little bit conservative on the end of trying to maybe challenge, which I find kind of funny because the Rangers actually they do give a power play goal in this game, but the Rangers penalty kill has been pretty good. But that, again, the point is the power play. And it just is not been good. And it needs to be so much better if the Rangers are going to have any true aspirations for this to be a successful season. So they don't score there. However, at 10-8, at 10-16, and very deservedly so, Vladislav Gavrikov gets his first goal as a Ranger, and it's assisted by Fox and Brodzinski. Good job with the fourth line, especially Brodzinski, using some speed, finding his way into the zone, just staying with it. He had a shot block, but then he goes around behind the net, finds Adam Fox in the right point. Gavrikov then gets it on the left point, takes a shot, an innocent shot, and it goes in. And I think that you got to give some credit to Edstrom and Carrick. Edstrom probably provides a little bit of a screen with his big frame, and then Carrick was in front as well. And so, if that's not the case, then I don't know how Joey Decord doesn't stop this, but it's Gavrikov's goal. And the Gavrikov Fox pair has been really, really good. It is the best first pair the Rangers have had in quite some time, truly. And hey, like even like I'll say this, Susie Borgen's been pretty good too. Like, and maybe more so Borgen, but like, let's not even go there. Like, and the ironic thing is that was actually a defensive pair for a little bit of time in Seattle, Susie and Borgen. But this is more about Gavrikov and Fox. They really have done just an excellent job. So we want to talk about a lot of the top paid players underperforming. Let's leave that to the forwards. Let's leave the conversation to the forwards. Let's not let that extend to the defensemen. Just look, Vlad Gavrikov got a big deal from the Rangers. It was a big 7-year contract. He is one of, even though it doesn't feel that way to some because he's new, Gavrikov is one of your highest paid players. And of course, Adam Fox is as well. And I feel like that has been really, really strong. And that's going to get you places. Now, you need a lot more than that, but that's a start, right? And so, no offense to Ryan Lindgren, but it's different, right? No offense to Keandre Miller, but Vladislav Gavrikov he's so good defensively. And it gives you so much more opportunity. It really is one of those things where it does lead to offense. And he's not like a total stiff. Look, he's not great. He doesn't have a lot of speed. Like he's not an offensive dynamo. But with Adam Fox and, he will probably be able to put up, some points. But that's not his game. It's about logging minutes, killing penalties, and really, really just limiting high danger chances, which he is doing. So that makes it 1-0 Rangers. But then Vakanainen hooks Berkeley Caton at 11:59. And look, Vakanainen has not been great. I understand why he was back in the lineup. I do. Like Matthew Robertson was struggling. I was okay with pulling Robertson. And I know that based on when you win, you typically keep the same lineup. And for that reason, we will probably see Vakanainen back at the versus Carolina. But don't be totally shocked if they make a change. And certainly if the Rangers lose, expect to see Matthew Robertson back in there. Look, it's to the point right now where that's going to be back and forth. Where like Carson Soucy, based on what we saw last year, it's like really hard for me to fully trust Soucy, but he's had success in the NHL before. And look, like Carson Soucy's paid like probably what, $3.5 million. I wish I had that correct, but somewhere in that general range, if that means anything. Whereas Vakanainen's kind of like half that amount. And he is truly more of a depth defenseman and a guy that is out the scratch. And Matthew Robertson was someone that was in the AHL for a long time. The point I'm trying to make is that that's a back and forth situation that it's up for grabs. And I think that Vakanainen, I just have not been impressed with him. I did not mind him last season. And maybe part of it was kind of just like being happy that Trouba was gone and he was part of the Trouba trade. But I actually really believe that Vakanainen was providing serviceable minutes. He was not great, but I thought he was okay. And here's my other thing too on this point. If and likely when Vakanainen is out of the lineup, I would stick with Soucy Borgen and see what Robertson Schneider provides. Because I didn't like Soucy with Schneider. Soucy Borgen has done the job. So to me, even though it's going to be new for both Robertson and Schneider, that would be my thought there, is to try those two together and see what happens. And, I think it just kind of makes sense. But the Vakanainen penalty happens, and unfortunately, Chandler Stevenson scores in the power play. Third goal of the season from Dunn and Tolvanen. Really nice wrist shot by Chandler Stevenson. It's a little bit of room where Carrick kind of backs off a bit. And a real nice snipe. Again, glove side for Shesterkin. Ties it up at 1, but a good response to the Rangers. They score just about a minute and 1 second to be exact after. And it's Noah Laba at 13:50, scoring a second goal of the season from Cuylle and Lafreniere. And this is part of the line changes. And this is where Laba, it's nice to see him be able to play with players that have a little more skill, right? Look, he was, and look, the funny thing is Taylor Radish, who was, one of his primary line mates, he actually has the most goals of the team. But, Lafreniere and Cuylle certainly have a lot more offensive flair. And if Noah Laba can continue his hardworking mentality, and hey, like he himself, like he has ability too. It's been exciting to see what he can do. This is a hard work goal that he starts. Laba is the one that actually causes the turnover. He poke checks the puck away from Matty Beniers, leads to a bit of a 3-on-2. He drops it. Lafreniere, who then goes down the middle, which was a good job by Lafreniere, passes it back to Will Cuylle. Cuylle takes a shot. Not a great job by Decor. Decor needs to not allow the rebound, but then Noah Laba is able to beat the defender behind him for the goal. And it was Jordan Eberle who he beat. So a hard work goal by Noah Laba. That's 2 goals on this road trip that he scored. It's good stuff. And just for his development, like the fact that he's being trusted in more situations. He really, really is. Like, I think Sullivan's actually a real fan of Noah Laba. It's not just, it's no smoke and mirrors here. And it's nice to see the results. So that makes it 2-1. I thought Laba was definitely one of the Rangers' best players in this game. Absolutely. As was Will Cuylle, who we'll talk about again later. But the Rangers are up 2-1 into 1, and they deserve to be winning. Second period rolls around, and at 1:56, Braden Schneider interferes with Capo Caco off of a face-off play, but the Rangers do kill that one off. However, though, at 6:59, Brandon Montour scores his 3rd goal of the season from Schwartz and Stevenson. This was, a real impressive heavy slap shot from Montour, but again, one that I think if Igor is right, is able to make a stop there. But again, no harm, no foul. Rangers end up winning the game, and it is what it is. It's 2-2 at this point. And then from there, a couple of failed Rangers power plays in the second period. 9:54, Shane Wright slashes Will Cuylle. They don't score. And then Ryan Lingard at 19:54 hooks Johnny Brodzinski. And then, that starts out the third period with a power play chance. They don't get it done. So that could be a momentum shifter when you don't score goals in those situations, but didn't allow for that to happen. Thought the Rangers played a really good third period. However, things got a little bit interesting at the end of the third. At the very end, last sort of 30 seconds, the puck was in the Rangers zone for a while. And, I think it ends up on Brandon Montour's stick at the point where I think he just lost track of how much time was left. I think if he knew, he would have just given it a chance. So Rangers kind of caught a break there because it felt that was probably one of the more nervous situations it was for the Rangers. But I just like the Rangers' response all game. The fact that Laba had that goal to make it 2-1, the fact that it did, even though it didn't count, the Cuylle, the power play chance on the Shane Wright penalty, which was not that much after the Kraken tied it. That was almost a potential response goal that didn't come to fruition. So let's go to overtime. And now that's back-to-back games with Rangers go to overtime. I've been critical of the Rangers as far as their overtime abilities, but I'll acknowledge here, the Seattle Kraken are not a team chock full of talent. So the Rangers doing it against Edmonton, that was a true shock. This one, not as much. Seattle, this is, in a league where obviously in 3-on-3 talent is everything. Rangers in the talent department, I would say, are, and this is no slight to the Kraken, but as far as just that top tier, they can match and are probably a little bit better in that regard. And the Rangers mostly had puck possession. There were some frustrating moments for sure. Specifically, Zibanejad, was contributed to a turnover that led to a 3-on-1 the other way that the Kraken didn't score. Mika's had his struggles in overtimes in big spots. I'll say that. And that's been tough to see. Even though there's been some good work in other areas of the game and different parts of the game. And then also Noah Laba, who very interesting that he was on there for 3-on-3, but he was struggling in terms of just the idea that you got to be smart as far as puck position. If there's ever a time when you do actually want to pass the puck and not overshoot and do some of the north-south things, now in some ways you do, but it's a little bit different over time. That is where, and even though it's been a struggle, the Panarins of the world could have some more success, where you were a little bit more deliberate with things. Now, again, that hasn't been successful. Panarin specifically in overtime, where and Zibanejad, they haven't been so good. But what ends up happening is it's JT Miller that's kind of at the center of it again, as he was in Edmonton. And it's Adam Fox who just, a simple drop pass from Fox to JT Miller. And he kind of just does the rest. And give Miller credit for just using some speed, accelerating when he needed to. And instead of taking the shot this time, like he did against Edmonton, and he had less room than he did in Edmonton, he's able to find Will Cuylle. It's kind of a 2-on-1. And Cuylle is able to pretty quickly get the puck off the stick and scores. Pass to Cord going from his right to left. And so that's Will Cuyle's second goal of the season from JT Miller and Adam Fox at 2:42 of overtime. It's Adam Fox's second point of the game. So he continues to really have a very nice season. The Rangers win it 3-2 against Seattle, where they outshot them 27-13. And the Rangers are now 6-1-1 on the road. So here's the funny thing. And that is truly, that by points, that's the best point total for any road record in the league. On the flip side, they have the least amount of points at home. There's only 2 teams in the NHL that don't have a win at home. And that's the Los Angeles Kings and the New York Rangers. Those are the 2. And so when the Rangers come home, they'll be taking on Carolina, a Carolina team coming off of a loss to Boston, a Carolina team that is pretty beat up. I don't think we're going to see the return of Keandre Miller in this game. And maybe that changes, but I know he was hurt and didn't sound overly promising for him to be back so soon. But this will be interesting. The Rangers, even though we're used to playoff success against Carolina in the regular season, especially very lately, they've not done well against the Hurricanes. And I could think back to a lot of home games too. So my feeling here isn't great, just based on the fact. And look, like first game back from a long road trip, that can be tough in general. Not to make excuses, but just the reality of it. And all that to say, like, then I'm really feeling a lot better. If they can beat Carolina, improve this to a 4-game winning streak and kind of get the monkey off the back for the home stuff, that'd be great. But I think they're going to have to work it out for them. They'll have to earn it for sure. Hurricanes are one of the tougher teams to play against, really the class in the regular season sense of the Metropolitan Division. But a lot of good things here. The power play is still a problem. What you're getting from the likes of a Panarin and other sort of forwards that you're really depending upon, it's not there, and that isn't good. But just the overall defensive play of this team, when they're buying into Sullivan, it's really making a difference. And that's encouraging. It's going to keep them in games. It's going to make it frustrating because they're going to play more low-scoring games. Look, you got to think back to this being a little bit like it was in the Tortorella days. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar. That's the same coaching tree. He learned a lot from him. And so if there's any style of play that this would be reminiscent for the last 15 to 20 years, it would be the John Tortorella Rangers of the early 2010s. You think back specifically like 2012 when they were really operating as best as they could under Tortorella. But right around there, that's what it might be. And look, like that's going to lead to a lot of 3-2 type games as we saw here, where if the Rangers had any bit of scoring ability, they should have won this easily. And it would have been a little bit frustrating to only walk away with 1 point, but they get the 2. They finished the road trip on a 3-game winning streak after that tough loss to Calgary, after some not so good losses against San Jose and Minnesota. The Rangers' first 3-game winning streak since mid-November of 2024. Almost a full year. Crazy that they did that. And they should feel good about themselves coming home. So 6-5-2 now. And they'll be greeted by the Carolina Hurricanes coming back to MSG. And we'll see if the Rangers can finally get their first win at home.